The first stone hit the window just after midnight. It didn't shatter the glass. It wasn't meant to. It was small, deliberate, a sound chosen to wake without warning. Amber froze in the narrow kitchen of her rented house, one hand still wrapped around a chipped mug she hadn't realized she'd been holding for 10 minutes straight. The clock above the sink blinked 12:07, the numbers uneven, like they were tired of keeping time. She didn't move right away. Experience had taught her that reacting too fast only fed whatever waited on the other side of the walls. Another stone followed. Louder this time. More impatient. Amber exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Her shoulders ached from the double shift, her feet throbbed, and her mind was already half asleep. But fear sharpened her senses in an instant. She turned off the kitchen light, plunging the small house into darkness, and stepped carefully toward the front window. Outside, the street was poorly lit, one flickering lamp casting long shadows across cracked pavement. 3 figures stood near the curb. All men. All unfamiliar. One of them laughed, low and ugly, like he owned the sound. "Come on, sweetheart," one called out. "We know you're in there." Amber's jaw tightened. She didn't answer. She never did. Her fingers brushed the curtain, lifting it just enough to confirm what she already knew. They'd been coming by for weeks now. Sometimes in a car that idled too long. Sometimes on foot. Always late. Always confident. The kind of confidence that came from knowing a woman lived alone, that no one would come looking if something went wrong. They thought she was alone. Amber stepped back from the window, her heart pounding, and reached for her phone. The screen lit up her face as she scrolled through contacts she wouldn't call. No family nearby. No friends close enough to matter. The police had already made it clear how little they cared about noise complaints in this part of the city. Another knock this time. A fist. Harder. Closer. "Open up," a voice demanded. "We just want to talk." Her mind raced. She could stay silent and hope they got bored. She could run to the back door and slip into the alley, though that had its own risks. Or she could do what she'd done once before, stand her ground and pray intimidation went both ways. She straightened, walked to the door, and spoke without opening it. "Go away." The laughter stopped. "Listen to her," one of them said. "She's got a mouth on her." Amber swallowed. "You're on private property. Leave." A pause. Then a sound she hadn't expected. An engine. Low. Smooth. Expensive. Headlights cut through the darkness from the far end of the street, bright enough to wash over the men and cast their shadows long and thin against Amber's front wall. The car approached slowly, unhurried, like it had nowhere else to be. A black sedan, polished to a mirror shine, the kind of vehicle that didn't belong on a street where most cars were held together by rust and hope. The men turned, confused. One stepped back instinctively. The car stopped directly in front of Amber's house. The engine didn't turn off right away. It idled, steady and controlled, a presence that demanded attention without raising its voice. Then the driver's door opened. Amber held her breath. He stepped out with the ease of someone used to being watched. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dressed in dark clothing that looked simple until you noticed how perfectly it fit. He didn't rush. Didn't glance around like he was unsure. His gaze landed on the 3 men as if he'd been expecting them. One of them scoffed. "This doesn't concern you, man." The stranger's eyes lifted slowly. Cold. Measuring. "It does now," he said. His voice was calm, accented, Italian edges softened by something harder underneath. It carried across the street without effort. The men shifted. Amber could see it even from behind the door, the subtle recalculation, the way confidence faltered when it met something sharper. "You lost?" another asked. The stranger took a step forward. "Just one." It was enough. "You are," he replied. Silence stretched. The engine purred behind him like a restrained animal. The first man laughed nervously. "Look, we don't want trouble." "No," the stranger said. "You want opportunity." He tilted his head slightly, eyes flicking toward Amber's front door, then back to them. "This house is not that." Something in his tone made Amber's skin prickle. It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening in the way movies taught people to expect. It was final. One of the men muttered something under his breath. Another took a step back. The third hesitated, pride warring with instinct. "Who do you think you are?" he demanded. The stranger's lips curved, not quite a smile. "Someone you don't want to meet twice." That was enough. They retreated, one by one, insults dissolving into hurried steps, until their figures disappeared down the street, swallowed by darkness. The stranger watched them go, expression unchanged, until they were gone completely. Only then did he turn toward the house. Amber's heart slammed against her ribs. She hadn't moved. Hadn't breathed. Every instinct screamed at her that danger hadn't left, it had simply changed shape. A knock sounded at the door. Not a fist this time. Knuckles. Controlled. Polite. Amber hesitated, then approached slowly, peering through the peephole. His face filled the small circle of glass. Sharp features. Dark eyes that seemed to see more than they should. There was no anger there. No heat. Just focus. She unlocked the door but didn't open it fully, leaving the chain in place. "Yes?" she asked. "I apologize for the disturbance," he said. "They won't return." "You don't know that," Amber replied. "I do." Something about the certainty in his voice made her stomach twist. She studied him more closely now. He looked out of place and perfectly at home all at once. Like he belonged to a world that didn't touch hers, until tonight. "Why?" she asked. "Why help me?" A beat passed. The streetlight caught the edge of his jaw. "Because I don't like predators," he said. "And because someone should have intervened sooner." Amber frowned. "Do I know you?" "No." "Then how did you know where I live?" Another pause. Not hesitation. Consideration. "I noticed a pattern," he said carefully. "And I don't ignore patterns." Her fingers tightened around the doorframe. Every warning she'd ever learned pressed against her spine. "My name is Nazar," he added. "I wanted you to hear it from me, not someone else." "Amber," she replied before she could stop herself. His eyes softened, just a fraction, like the name mattered. "I won't keep you," Nazar said. "I only wanted to ensure you were safe tonight." "And tomorrow?" she asked quietly. His gaze held hers. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll see." He stepped back, giving her space, then turned toward the car. The driver was already waiting, door open. Before getting in, Nazar looked back once more. "You are not as alone as they think," he said. Then he was gone, the car pulling away smoothly, disappearing into the night as if it had never been there at all. Amber closed the door slowly, leaning her forehead against the wood as her knees weakened. Her house was silent again. Too silent. Outside, the street returned to its uneasy stillness. But something had shifted. And Amber knew, deep in her bones, that this was only the beginning. The next morning arrived without relief. Amber woke before her alarm, the echo of the engine from the night before still humming in her chest like a low note that refused to fade. For a moment, disoriented, she wondered if she'd dreamed it all, the stones, the voices, the black car, the man with the Italian accent and eyes that saw too much. Then she noticed the silence. The kind that followed a storm. The kind that meant something had passed through and left the air changed. She lay still, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening. No footsteps outside. No laughter. No car idling too long on the curb. Her phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark, no missed calls, no messages. Still, she didn't relax. Amber rose slowly, pulling on her robe, moving through the house with the careful steps of someone who had learned not to assume safety. She checked the front window first. The street looked the same as always, uneven pavement, tired houses, a trash bin tipped on its side from the wind. Nothing to suggest the night before had happened at all. But she felt it. In the way her shoulders stayed tense. In the way her breath never fully deepened. At the diner, the bell above the door rang as she stepped inside, and the familiar smells of coffee and grease wrapped around her like a threadbare blanket. It was early, the breakfast rush just beginning, the regulars already seated in their usual spots. Amber tied her apron, pasted on her professional smile, and slipped into motion. "Morning, Amber," Mrs. Donnelly called from booth 3. "You look tired." "Always am," Amber replied lightly, pouring coffee. "What can I get you?" She moved from table to table, her body performing the routine while her mind stayed half a step behind, replaying last night in fragments. The way Nazar had stood. The calm certainty in his voice. The promise tucked into his final words, whether he'd meant it as one or not. "You are not as alone as they think." She didn't know if that frightened her more than the alternative. Around noon, as the lunch crowd thinned, she felt it again, that sensation of being observed. Not the crude, invasive stare she'd grown used to, but something quieter. Intentional. Amber glanced toward the window. The black sedan was parked across the street. Her heart skipped. Once. Then raced. It didn't look threatening in daylight. If anything, it looked absurdly out of place among the faded storefronts and dented cars. The driver remained inside, hands on the wheel, eyes forward. The passenger seat was empty. Amber's fingers tightened around the coffee pot. She told herself to look away. To focus on her job. To not invite complications. The bell rang. He walked in like he belonged there. The diner didn't quiet. No dramatic pause. No collective intake of breath. But Amber felt the shift all the same, like a change in pressure. Nazar moved with unhurried confidence, his presence bending the space around him without effort. He wore a dark coat this time, tailored but understated, and when his gaze found her, it held. Not possession. Recognition. "Table for one?" she asked when he reached the counter, her voice steady by sheer force of will. "Yes," he said. "Wherever you recommend." She gestured to a booth near the back, away from the windows. He slid in smoothly, eyes never leaving her face. "I didn't expect to see you again," Amber said as she handed him a menu. "I didn't expect to be welcome," he replied. "I didn't say that." A faint curve touched his mouth. "No. You didn't." She took his order, black coffee, eggs, toast, simple. Ordinary. The kind of meal that didn't match the man ordering it. When she returned with the food, she noticed the way he scanned the room, cataloging exits, people, reflections in chrome surfaces. It wasn't paranoia. It was habit. "Did they come back?" he asked quietly. "No," she said. "Not yet. They won't." Her eyes flicked up. "You're very sure?" "I am." She set the plate down with a little more force than necessary. "You can't control everything." "No," he agreed. "But I can influence outcomes." Amber studied him. "Is that what this is? Influence?" For now. She should have ended the conversation there. Instead, she asked, "Why me?" Nazar leaned back slightly. "Because you don't ask for help. And people like those men look for that. That doesn't explain why you care." Another pause. This one heavier. "Because I see what happens when no one intervenes," he said. "And because indifference is a choice." Amber didn't know what to say to that. When he left, he paid in cash and left a tip far larger than necessary. She watched him through the window as he returned to the car, spoke briefly to the driver, then pulled away. He didn't come back the next day. Or the day after that. The street stayed quiet. Too quiet. Amber found herself checking the window more often than she liked to admit, scanning for a familiar shape that never appeared. She told herself it was relief. That his absence meant the threat had passed. But something had been opened, and now she felt the absence like a missing step in the dark. A week later, the manager called her into the back office. "They're cutting hours," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Nothing personal." It was always personal. Amber nodded, numb. She did the math in her head as she walked home that night, the numbers refusing to align into anything hopeful. Rent. Utilities. Food. There was no room for mistakes. She didn't notice the sedan until it was beside her, moving slowly, matching her pace. Her breath caught. The window rolled down. "Get in," Nazar said. Not a command. An invitation waited with urgency. "Are you out of your mind?" she hissed, glancing around. "You're being followed," he replied calmly. Her stomach dropped. "By who?" "I'd rather not find out here." She hesitated for half a second longer, then opened the door and slid inside. The car accelerated smoothly, merging into traffic, leaving the dim street behind. "Who?" she repeated. "Someone testing boundaries," Nazar said. "Which tells me the message wasn't clear enough." Amber stared straight ahead, hands clenched in her lap. "I didn't ask for this." "No," he said. "You didn't." They drove in silence for several minutes before she spoke again. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safer." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I'll give you right now." She wanted to argue. To demand control. Instead, she leaned back, exhaustion catching up to adrenaline. They stopped in front of a building that looked nothing like the neighborhood she'd left. Clean lines, guarded entrance, quiet confidence. The driver stepped out, opened her door. "I can't stay here," Amber said immediately. "You can," Nazar replied. "And you will." "Temporarily." She laughed, sharp and humorless. "You don't get to decide that." He met her gaze. "I get to ensure you're alive to argue with me." Inside, the apartment was minimalist, elegant without warmth. Amber hovered near the doorway, feeling like an intruder. "This isn't a favor," she said. "This is control." "Yes," Nazar agreed. "It is." The honesty startled her. "I won't cage you," he continued. "You can leave. But understand this, until the situation resolves, the danger follows you." "And when does it resolve?" "When I decide it has." Anger flared. "You sound just like them." Something darkened in his eyes. "I am not like them." She believed him. That was the problem. Days turned into an uneasy rhythm. Amber stayed in the apartment while Nazar disappeared into a world he never explained. Guards nodded politely but never spoke. Food appeared. Time stretched. When he did return, late nights mostly, there was an unspoken understanding between them, an awareness that bound without trust. Conversations were sparse at first, cautious. "You don't have to do this," she told him one evening as he poured himself a drink. "I know." "Then why are you?" He looked at her over the rim of the glass. "Because walking away would be easier. And I don't trust easy choices." She studied him, the lines of restraint etched into his posture. "What do you want from me?" His answer was immediate. "Nothing." She scoffed. "No one does something like this for nothing." He set the glass down. "Perhaps I want to remember what it's like to protect something without owning it." The words settled between them, fragile and dangerous. Amber didn't soften. Not yet. But she stopped packing her bag. And somewhere between the guarded silences and the late-night conversations that edged closer to honesty than either of them intended, the tension shifted. Not lessened. Deepened. Both of them knew it. Neither was ready to name it. The first crack didn't come with shouting or gunfire. It came with silence. Amber noticed it on the 5th night in the apartment, when Nazar didn't come home. At first, she told herself not to read into it. He had disappeared for hours before. Sometimes whole days. That was his world, meetings she wasn't part of, decisions made behind closed doors, a life structured around shadows and consequences. She had accepted that distance as part of the unspoken agreement between them. But this time felt different. The guards at the door were still there, faces impassive, movements precise. The city beyond the windows continued as usual, lights blinking, traffic murmuring far below. Everything looked normal. Yet something felt off, like a held breath that refused to release. Amber sat on the edge of the couch, phone in her hands, staring at a blank screen. She didn't have Nazar's number. Had never asked for it. The realization hit harder than she expected. For all the time they'd spent under the same roof, for all the conversations that had stretched late into the night, she still had no direct way to reach him. And that felt intentional. She stood and walked to the window, pressing her forehead lightly against the cool glass. Somewhere out there, he was moving pieces she couldn't see, fighting battles she didn't understand, all because of her, or so she'd been told. The thought twisted something in her chest. She didn't sleep. When dawn came, gray and unkind, Amber was still awake, curled into the corner of the couch, fully dressed. The sound of the door unlocking made her flinch. Nazar entered without ceremony, his coat still on, his posture rigid in a way she hadn't seen before. He looked untouched, no visible injuries, no blood, but there was a tightness around his eyes that spoke of something far worse than physical damage. "You're back," she said quietly. He stopped when he saw her, surprise flickering across his face. "You should have been sleeping." "I couldn't." Their gazes locked. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Nazar exhaled, slow and controlled, and removed his coat. He set it aside with deliberate care, like he needed the routine to ground himself. "They made a move," he said. Amber's heart sank. "Who?" "The men from your street were not acting alone," he replied. "They were testing you." "Testing me?" She straightened. "Me?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. "You were leveraged before I realized it." The words landed like a blow. "So this is my fault," she said flatly. "No," he said immediately. "This is my responsibility." "That's not the same thing." "It is to me." Amber stood, anger cutting through the exhaustion. "You said you noticed a pattern. You said you intervened because it was right. Was any of that true?" Nazar met her gaze without flinching. "Yes." "Then tell me the rest," she demanded. "Because I'm done being moved around like a piece on your board." Something shifted in his expression. Not irritation. Not defensiveness. Reluctance. "You were not targeted because you were alone," he said. "You were targeted because someone wanted my attention." Her breath caught. "You knew." "I suspected," he corrected. "I hoped I was wrong." "And now?" "Now I'm certain." The room felt suddenly smaller. Amber laughed once, sharply. "So this was never about me being in danger. It was about you." "No," he said, his voice low. "It became about you when I brought you here." "That's convenient." "You think I wanted this?" His control cracked, just enough for the edge beneath to show. "You think I wanted you pulled into my world?" She hesitated. "Answer me," he said. "No," she admitted. "But you still did it." "Yes," he said. "And that is why I won't let it end badly." Amber shook her head, pacing now. "You don't get to decide what badly means for me. You don't get to decide anything for me." He watched her move, his expression unreadable. "Then decide," he said. "Leave." "I won't stop you." She froze. "You said the danger follows me," she whispered. "It does." "Then that's not a choice. That's a threat dressed up as one." Nazar closed the distance between them, stopping just short of invading her space. It's reality, he said. And I hate it. The admission caught her off guard. You hate it, she echoed. Yes, he said quietly. Because you didn't choose this. And because if something happens to you. He stopped. Amber searched his face. Then what? Then I will have failed, he finished. And I don't survive my failures. The words were heavy with implication. She looked away first. The days that followed were tense, stretched thin by unspoken fears and growing resentment. Nazar became more guarded, his absences longer, his returns quieter. When he was present, he watched her too closely, like he was memorizing something he feared losing. Amber noticed the change in herself too. She jumped at sudden sounds. She started measuring exits the way he did. She learned the rhythms of the guard's shifts without meaning to. She was adapting to a world she had never wanted to understand. And that frightened her more than anything else. The breaking point came 3 nights later. Amber was in the kitchen when she heard raised voices, muffled, urgent. Nazar's voice was calm, controlled, but there was an undercurrent of steel beneath it. Another voice answered him, sharper, unfamiliar. She moved closer, stopping just short of the doorway. You're compromised, the other man said. Everyone knows it. I'm aware, Nazar replied. Then fix it. A pause. No. Amber's breath caught. This is not negotiable, the man snapped. You've let sentiment cloud your judgment. She is not a liability, Nazar said. She is a weakness. Silence fell like a blade. Amber stepped into the doorway before she could stop herself. If you're talking about me, she said, you should probably do it to my face. Both men turned. The stranger assessed her with cool detachment, then looked back at Nazar. You didn't tell her. There was nothing to tell, Nazar said. Liar, Amber whispered. The word hung in the air. Nazar's gaze softened when it met hers, but there was no denial in his eyes. Not yet, he said. The other man scoffed. You see? This is exactly the problem. Get out, Nazar said sharply. The man hesitated. You're making a mistake. I said, Nazar repeated, his voice dropping to something dangerous, get out. The door closed behind the stranger with finality. Amber stared at Nazar, her hands trembling. How long? She asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. Since before the diner. Her chest tightened. So every word, every gesture was real, he interrupted. Every one. Except the part where you told me I wasn't a pawn. He stepped closer. You are not. Then why does everyone else think I am? Because they don't see you, he said. They see what you represent. And what is that? She demanded. He hesitated. My blind spot, he said finally. The honesty undid her. Tears burned her eyes, anger and fear tangling into something sharp and painful. I can't do this, she said. I can't live in a world where my existence is a weakness someone might exploit. Nazar reached for her, stopping himself inches away. Then let me remove the threat. That's not what I meant. I know, he said softly. You mean me. The silence stretched, heavy and irrevocable. Yes, she whispered. I do. That was the moment everything collapsed. Nazar straightened, the distance between them suddenly vast. If you leave, he said, I can't protect you. I never asked you to, Amber replied, though her voice broke. That's not true, he said. You just didn't know how. She turned away, moving toward the bedroom. I'll pack. He didn't stop her. By the time she returned with her bag, the apartment felt colder. Nazar stood by the window, his back to her. I meant what I said, he told her. You are not alone. She swallowed. Then let me find out who I am without you deciding it for me. The guards opened the door without comment. Amber didn't look back. The car ride away from the building was silent, her reflection staring back at her from the darkened window, eyes hollow, jaw set. She didn't know where she was going. Only that staying had become unbearable. Behind her, Nazar remained at the window long after she was gone. For the first time in years, he didn't move to fix the situation immediately. He stood still. And wondered if letting her go would cost him everything. Amber thought leaving would make the air easier to breathe. Instead, it followed her like a weight she couldn't put down. The apartment she returned to was smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she had changed. The silence there wasn't the uneasy stillness of danger, it was emptier. The walls didn't echo footsteps anymore. No guards outside. No quiet certainty that someone else was watching the dark so she didn't have to. The first night, she slept with the lights on. The second, she slept with her shoes beside the bed. By the third, exhaustion finally won, and she dreamed of engines idling in the distance and a voice telling her she was not alone. Days passed. No one followed her. No stones hit the window. No men waited on the curb. And yet, the fear didn't fully loosen its grip. Amber returned to the diner, took the extra shifts they offered, nodded and smiled and poured coffee like her life had never intersected with a man who moved the city from the shadows. Her co-workers noticed the change in her, quieter, more distant, but no one asked questions. People rarely did. At night, she replayed the last conversation in her head. You mean me? She hated that he'd been right. Nazar Volchek did not sleep. The city continued to obey him. Meetings were held. Orders carried out. Threats erased with precision and restraint. The men who had tested his boundaries were dealt with quietly, permanently removed from the board without spectacle. The message was clear. She is untouchable. But power, Nazar had learned, meant nothing when the person you were protecting had chosen to walk away. His penthouse felt hollow without her presence. He caught himself listening for sounds that no longer existed, the soft steps in the kitchen, the pause before she spoke when she was weighing whether honesty was worth the risk. He had lost many things in his life. He had survived all of them by turning loss into armor. This one cut differently. On the fourth night after she left, he stood by the window again, city lights reflecting in his dark eyes, and made a decision he had avoided for years. Not as a boss. As a man. Amber was closing the diner late when she sensed it, that same shift in the air she had felt weeks ago, but gentler this time. She stepped outside, locking the door behind her, the street quiet and washed in yellow light. The black sedan waited across the road. Her heart stumbled, then steadied. Nazar didn't get out right away. The engine shut off. Seconds passed. Then the door opened. He approached slowly, hands visible, posture careful in a way she had never seen before. No guards. No urgency. Just him. I won't follow you, he said when he stopped a few feet away. I won't ask you to come back. Amber crossed her arms, bracing herself. Then why are you here? Because I owe you the truth, he replied. All of it. And because you deserve the choice I didn't give you before. She studied him in silence, searching for manipulation, for control. She found none. What changed? She asked. I did, Nazar said simply. When you left, I realized protection without respect is just another kind of cage. Her throat tightened despite herself. The thread is gone, he continued. Not managed. Not delayed. Gone. There is nothing tying you to my world now. And you? She asked quietly. He hesitated. I am what I am. That won't change. But I will never decide your life for you again. The streetlight hummed softly above them. Amber took a slow breath. You hurt me. I know, he said. And I will live with that whether you forgive me or not. She stepped closer, close enough now to see the weariness beneath his composure. You scared me. I was scared too, he admitted. I just didn't know how to say it. The admission settled between them, fragile and real. What do you want? She asked. Nazar met her gaze. To know you, not as something I protect, but as someone who chooses to stand with me. Or not. Either answer matters. Amber looked down the street, then back at the diner behind her. The life she had before was still there, waiting, predictable and safe in its own small way. But safety had never meant peace. Slow, she said finally. If there's anything between us, it has to be slow. On my terms. A corner of his mouth lifted, not triumph, but relief. Always. She didn't get in the car that night. Instead, they walked. They talked about small things at first, the diner, the city, the ways people learned to survive. Nazar listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, there were no half-truths left. Over time, trust rebuilt itself, not as something grand, but as something earned in quiet moments and kept promises. Amber never moved back into his world completely. She kept her apartment. Kept her job. Kept herself. Nazar learned to meet her where she was. And when the black sedan pulled up to her house again, weeks later, it did so without urgency, without fear. This time, the door opened because she wanted it to. They stood together on the threshold, the night calm, the street empty, not because she was alone. But because she wasn't. Hey loves. He was a man who believed protection meant control. She was a woman who learned that safety means choice. This isn't just a story about danger or power, it's about two people learning that staying is only real when it's freely chosen. Thanks for walking this story with me until the end. More stories soon. Bye for now.